Good evening and welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast.
I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sansbury.
Good evening, Simon. Another episode and all the excitement of an away fixture.
Indeed, we've gone on a journey, but not very far.
A little trip up the A27.
Yes.
Which I never realised, as it's an A road, you could attempt to ride from Portsmouth to Havant on your bicycle, but I wouldn't recommend it.
No, nor would I, and indeed some people do, but there is a beautiful cycle path alongside the A27 that goes through the nature reserve there, so I'd definitely recommend that instead.
Excellent. So yeah, we're going to have a quick look at Havant, a bit of compare and contrast with Portsmouth, and I understand we've got three fine guests joining us this evening.
We have indeed. So we have leader of Havant Borough Council, Councillor Alex Rennie, joining us. We have Councillor Joe Lowe joining us, and Councillor Phil Monday joining us. So we've got each of the major parties joining us this evening. We did send invites to everybody that was on the council, but we mucked up our research a little bit, so very late in the game sent our invites to the three independents that are on Havant Borough Council, but they possibly haven't had a chance to apply. But nonetheless, we've got three excellent guests and lots of subjects to go through.
So, as the man that does the research and has the tail of the tape, Havant and Portsmouth.
Yes, indeed. So it's not quite a tale of two cities, is it? But it's a tale of two neighbouring boroughs. So I'll just quickly headline this before we bring the guests in. But you can so Portsmouth has a population of about 205,000, and it covers an area of about 16 square miles. And it's a unitary authority with 42 councillors, 17 Conservative, 15 Lib Dem, 7 Labour, to the progressive Portsmouth People's Group, and 1 independent, but is being run in Lib Dem minority control, but has 2 MPs, 1 Conservative, 1 Labour, obviously Portsmouth North and Portsmouth South with Penny Mordaunt and Stephen Morgan, but the 2 parliamentary constituencies completely contained in the boundaries of Portsmouth, and that includes the bit that's on the mainland where we're broadcasting from. So none of this splitter nonsense about Portsmouth ends at Hillsey Lines. Havant, on the other hand, 126,000 residents, 21 square miles, and is 38 councillors, 33 Conservative, 1 Labour, 1 Lib Dem, 3 independent, a Conservative majority, and we have so in Havant there is one parliamentary constituency completely contained within the borough, but there's also a little bit of Meon Valley. So Alan Mack is the Conservative MP for Havant, and Flick Drummond is the Conservative MP for Meon Valley, which I should say is a bit of is within Havant Borough. So that's the 2 boroughs. So shall we get our and my apologies, obviously I misquoted that. Phil isn't a councillor, but my apologies for that. So shall we get our guests in?
Marvellous. Good evening and welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Good, love to be here.
Yeah.
Marvellous. So we're going to start just by asking you to introduce yourself, which party you represent, but more interestingly for our listeners and viewers, kind of a little bit of your background and how and why you got into local politics. And if I could start off with Alex, please.
Hi, yeah, thanks, Ian. So I'm Councillor Alex Rennie, and I'm the leader of Havant Borough Council. I've been leader since May 2021, so just under a year, and I've been a councillor for just shy of 4 years. So got enough time to understand what the role entails, and obviously from my point of view, I'm what really drives me is making Havant a better place, representing our residents. I'm really passionate about the area, and it, I think it's one that it's got a lot of great traits. It's a great town, and well, two towns. You include Waterloo and Havant, and then the surrounding areas in Emsworth and Hayling Islands. And I'm involved just for that reason, really, because I'm really passionate about place shaping our area, making it a better place, and representing our residents. Bit more about myself. Before I got into local politics, I used to be a journalist, and now involved in politics as well, my job wise. So yeah, that's me. And yeah, thanks.
Marvellous, thank you, Alex. And I'll ask the same question to Joe, please.
Hi, yeah. I've been a councillor shy of 4 years myself. I started delivering leaflets for Faith Ponsonby, who was the councillor for the ward I'm in, and she then came up to me and said, "You fancy standing?" So I'll give it a go. I'll do my best. The year I was elected, sadly, I lost my father, so that sort of impacted a little bit. But he's always been a Lib Dem supporter, so I sort of carried him with me through it all. But yeah, my aim is basically to represent everybody. It doesn't matter how where you live. We're all here together. Let's work together and make it better for everybody to live in, and tighter community for everybody.
Perfect. And what about pre-politics or outside of politics?
Pre-politics, Joe? I used to be a dinner lady at a local school. I work as a programme seller at the Portsmouth Football Club.
Marvellous.
So I'm known for my mouth down there, very loud. And I'm also a member of a local choir as well. So
vocal in every respect, then, Joe.
Yes.
Marvellous. And Phil, moving on to yourself.
Hello. No, I'm not a councillor. I've stood for the council in the last 3 or 4 elections. I've probably been active in politics only for the last 6 years since I retired. Before that, I was a teacher for 40 years. The last 17 of those, I was a secondary head teacher. So I had a responsibility for about 900 students. I had about 100 staff and a budget of about 4 million that we had to deal with. So with that experience, when I retired, I kind of wanted to do something. I've been a Labour supporter all my life, or all my adult life. And I thought this was a good way to do things. And I have to be honest, I think as well, having lived in Havant for all that working time, basically, I think there are things we could do better. And I thought, well, if you think things you could do better, then you actually have to, put your head above the parapet and say so and say how it could be done. So that's what interests me about it. I'm particularly motivated, I suppose, because I want a fair society. And I worry about the growing disparity between the very rich and the poorer members of our society. I think that's wrong. And I feel that quite strongly. In the context of Havant, we'll get a chance to talk about that. I also am very keen on openness. So I think something like this is excellent. I think it's really important that we as people who are involved in politics share the issues. And I want any issues that the council has to be shared. And I think it's important that we share issues that are not just when they're sorted or when a decision's made, but actually sharing the fact that things can be difficult to decide and that council should share that with us and enable us to be part of that debate. It doesn't take away the power of the council in having to make the decisions because they're the elected representatives. But it's quite important to me that there is an open debate. So things like this are really important. I think we have to protect our democracy. And the last thing I think, so I'll finish with it. The last thing I think is I think environmental issues are really important. I think they should be on the top of everybody's agenda. And we need to do more, all of us. And so I think we need to have debate about that. Thank you.
No, thank you, Phil, and thanks to Alex and Joe. And no, we are more than happy. Our sole reason for being here as the Havant Politics podcast as we are today is really to give time and space for all the things that really matter to be kicked about and discussed. Simon.
Thank you very much. And just to point out, anyone following the live stream, Phil's image seems to be frozen, but obviously his audio is still coming on loud and clear. So apologies for that, but we'll press on. But yeah, thank you for that. And I will, in line with my correction, point out that we had a fantastic amount of help with our research from Tim Owens this week. So thank you, Tim, for giving us some insight on events kind of Havantwards. But the error of mine about Phil not being a councillor was entirely mine and not Tim. So I'm not going to blame our researcher in that respect. So so moving on to question 2. So Portsmouth obviously is as we said earlier on, is a unitary authority, and Havant Borough Council, you sit within Hampshire County Council. So you know, so from us, from you know, not all of our listeners that are in Portsmouth will kind of know actually how that difference works. So what's the split of the responsibilities between the two types of authorities, so between the borough council and the county council, and what are the benefits versus the challenges of that type of structure? And if you could change it, what would you change it to? And if I could take that question first to Phil, please.
Right. Well, I work, when I was a head teacher, I worked for Hampshire, so I know a bit about Hampshire. Is basically the authority that deals with education in schools. It deals with social care. It deals with highways and a number of other things. The borough council, or the district council in some cases, that deals more with planning. So all the issues to do with houses and housing, what type of housing, where it goes, that's for the borough. All the issues like refuse collection, local amenities, that tends to be the local borough. I'm probably a bit resistant to the idea of changing the system, mainly because I think if you take the further away you take government from people, the harder it is to engage them. And I think it's realistic that areas like education and social care require bigger, you know, they're things that you need a bigger mass, if you like, to do an efficient job. But some of those things, it's better to be local. So I think things like refuse collection, I mean, I know it doesn't sound very exciting, but it does matter to people. And having that at a local level where you can speak about it locally and you can get in action locally, I think is really valuable. So I'm, on the whole, inclined to wish to keep it as it is. But I'm reasonably open to it, really. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And if I can go next to Alex.
Yeah, thanks. I think Phil summed up very well the responsibilities. I always describe it as the big three, which is, as Phil said, transport, education, adult social care. So those are 3 big areas that Hampshire County Council deal with. They're hugely resource intensive, very expensive, and residents might be interested to know that in their council tax, of the money they spend and goes towards local authorities, about 12% of that goes to Havant Borough Council. About 80% goes to the county, and then you've got the rest. You've got the fire service, and you've got the police and others taking the little extra bits on the side. So when you think about it, the vast majority of money in your council tax is going to county to deliver those really resource intensive, expensive items. Havant Borough Council, we're sort of focused on place shaping, as Phil said. We've got refuse collection, planning, economic development, regeneration. So from our point of view, we can just really get on and focus with that just place shaping agenda, as I call it, in Havant, really getting on and delivering things that have a real impact on people's lives. But interestingly, actually, we have over 80 statutory services as a district tier or local authority. So we actually have a huge number, far more statutory services than the county does, but clearly not quite as resource intensive. I'm fully in favour of the 2-tier system. I think it's very effective for counties like ours. As I say, you know, I think devolution is about devolving to the lowest level. I'm truly passionate about how devolution works and making sure that it's felt by real people on the ground in the areas they live. So actually, you know, nobody wants devolution and ending up in Winchester. You know, devolution has to flow to the lowest possible level. So 2-tier is very good at that. You know, we're going to start seeing some more changes down the line with the white paper. I think you mentioned that in your question, and talking about things like the shared prosperity fund that will come out and start to be delivered in the next 12 months, and that's a district tier authority power again. So actually, what we're starting to see is, districts making the case that they are the local authorities that can be trusted to deliver real change for areas, and I think we are going to be doing that, and we're very excited to step up that challenge here in Havant and fly the flag for our area.
Thank you, Alex. And to Joe.
Yeah, it's the fact that some of the Havant Borough councillors are also Hampshire County councillors makes it easier for us to work together. The fact that we know the person we can go to contact when we get not complaints, some concerns from residents, and obviously along with like Alex said, transport, the education, and with Havant, obviously we've got the licensing. We're in charge of the taxis and also food safety and parking, which is not just an issue obviously here, but obviously in Portsmouth as well. So since I've been there, I haven't encountered any issues with the two-tier system. I think if we are going to look into a change, it needs to be not just the council, but the residents need to be involved as well, all working together, because at the end of the day, it would impact all of us if there's any changes made at all.
Okay, thank you very much. Ian?
Thank you, Joe. If we look at the makeup of the council, and it's very interesting contrasting it to Portsmouth, because obviously in Portsmouth, we've got the no overall control council, which we've had for many years now, and the Lib Dems running as a minority administration. But if we look at the makeup of Havant, you've got 33 Conservatives, 1 Labour, 1 Lib Dem, 3 Independents, but I think all of the Independents have some slight connection to the Conservative organisation. I guess in an environment like that, there's 2 interesting pieces for me. One is that variation in turnout. You're as high as 45% in Emsworth, but as low as 16% in Warren Park, and that mirrors quite a lot of the demographics of Portsmouth. But I guess the question is, with a council that is that one-sided, is that the right term? Probably not. But I guess the question is, how do you ensure that everybody's voices are heard? And I think, questions particularly to our Lib Dem and Labour chums is that, how do you motivate those people at the moment who perhaps don't vote, because they see it almost as an inevitability that the Conservatives will win? So I guess question first to Joe on how do we ensure everyone's voice is heard?
I think the important thing is to know that we're there to listen. I'm quite happy to sit down, have someone have a rant about stuff, get it all off their chest, because it's better getting it out there for people to hear, because everyone's got their own opinion, and that's what we need to hear as councillors. We need to hear what the residents are thinking on all these issues, whether they be small or big. And without that input from the residents, we can be stuck. And it's essential to have that connection between us and the residents, because at the end of the day, whichever way they voted, we've been put into that position. So it shouldn't matter who they've, we will know who's voted, but you can't tell who's voted for who. So you can't turn around to a resident and say, well, I'm not going to do this because you didn't vote for me. It shouldn't be like that at all. I was elected here. I'm going to fight for every resident as much as I can.
And I guess to that wider question, Joe, how do you motivate voters in those wards that, are potential Lib Dem voters, that they really should turn out to try and make a difference?
There's different ways. I'm one of those people. I prefer the face-to-face contact. I think it's better when it's face-to-face, because you get to it's more of a personal connection rather than on the phone. And now we've got the technology working, as we've noticed during lockdown. You can also host stuff like this as well. So that's also the face-to-face contact. But not everybody has the facilities with the internet or being able to connect like this. So it's finding the ways that work for each individual, because there'll be some people who'd be happy to sit and have a chat on the doorstep. There'll be some people who'd be happy just to have a quick chat on the phone. and it's letting them know that you're willing to be able to contact them whichever way suits them.
Perfect. Thank you, Joe. Same question to Phil then.
Well, I think you've got a really interesting contrast between Portsmouth and Havant. And personally, I'm much more in favour of, the idea of coalitions doesn't actually, or agreements doesn't actually worry me at all. I think that way encourages an engagement with people. I am worried about what goes on in Havant. I'm worried about the lack of opportunity to challenge our council. The fact that, in fact, at the last election, the 3 independents were elected as Conservatives. So 36 out of 38 councillors were elected as Conservatives, although the Conservatives only achieved, I think, possibly very slightly, something like 50.5% of the vote. And you're right, it's very difficult, actually, to get people to come out and vote. I mean, interestingly, you see that Emsworth and St Faith's were the highest turnout. We did a lot more. We were able to do a lot more there to put leaflets out, to doorstep and talk to people. The things that Joe's been talking about, but you actually need to give people information about what the decisions are being made. I frankly think our council doesn't do that enough. I frankly think they just tell us when they think they've done something very well. And I think they should be more honest. They should be more open about what's going on, for example, about the sewage and the issue there, what they're doing about it, what they think they can do about it. I'd like to know more about that. They don't tell us. They tell us just that everything's okay or everything's no, sorry, just watch your cat go past.
I did warn that it would happen.
Yeah, it did. So I think it's quite a problem, and it's a difficulty as well for the opposition parties to persuade people that it's worth voting. And that's our job to do that. So I'm not complaining about that. I do think for the council to be effective, they ought to give us more of an opportunity to express our views. We do have one councillor. She does an excellent job. She's done an excellent job for the council for well over 10 years. But she is retiring this time. And Joe is the only other councillor that's not a Conservative. I, for example, wrote to the leader of the council last year expressing my worry about the proposal to merge the staff of Havant and East Hampshire. And I said I didn't think it was a good idea, and I gave a lot of reasons why. I'll ask the leader of the council if he would speak to me. He didn't reply for about 3 weeks, and eventually, when he did reply, said, "I'm sorry, but I really don't think it's appropriate for me to talk to you." So I got no chance to express those views, even though they represented quite a lot of people in the Labour Party at that time, something like 500 members. I think the council's got to find ways to engage with people who don't necessarily hold exactly the same view. And there are lots of people in Havant who are active, who are interested, who attend council meetings, who write comments. And it's really important that the council takes note of them, because this is about democracy. This is about holding people to account. And democracy is something that's really valuable, that's really powerful, that's at risk, we know, in some places with some politicians that have occurred more recently. And we really need to fight for it. And that means to say we really need to have good, honest debates about the issues around us in a polite, civilized way, but we do need to be able to challenge each other. And I worry that Havant Council does not have an adequate opportunity for others to challenge its decisions.
Thank you, Phil. So, Alex, I've deliberately come to you last. So, if I was to think about you as the Prime Minister, you're sat in Havant potentially with 600 MPs in your party and an opposition of 50. So, I guess the challenge for you then as the leader of the council is how do you ensure that you get those balanced views from all of your, all of the people throughout the whole of the borough, and how do you get those kind of checks and balances that are essential for good governance?
Yeah, that's fine. Before I start, Phil, do you mind clarifying? I don't think that was me, was it, who didn't answer your phone call? It might have been the previous leader. Is that
No,
the case?
no, sorry, that's unfair. I should have been clear about that. It was Michael Wilson.
Okay, fine. I was worried there. I was
It was
ignoring your
not
phone
you,
calls.
but no. So I accept that you picked up a question that I raised and put it to the council. So I admit that personally, I'm not making that as a comment about you at all. But I am.
No, that's fine, Phil.
more
I just
general.
wanted to clarify that because obviously I'm hearing it, and I think I can't remember that particular correspondence, and I thought it might be my predecessor. So, but
Yeah.
I think in terms of you still made the comparison there to Westminster, Ian. And I think it's actually, I don't think it's right to necessarily make that comparison because local government works in a very different way. I think we leave party politics at the door in some ways. We all get on and do our things. All of my councillors are all very thorough. They care deeply about the borough they serve, and they do that in a pretty non-partisan way. And actually, if we're talking about what challenges or benefits the current system represents, you can, if not careful, and I've seen it in local authorities all over the country, where you can end up in partisan conversations and political point scoring, and actually it doesn't take your borough or your area very far at all, because you're spending too much time way down in political debate rather than actually getting on and doing what's right for your area. So there are benefits. I think look, I mean, I'm also somebody who deeply respects the electorate. Politics is and democracy is all about the residents deciding who wants to represent them, and I think I wholly trust them to make the right decision as to who they want to vote for. And from my point of view, I can't stop people voting Conservative, and nor would I want them to. I think Conservative councillors offer very good hard work, value for money for our council area. So I think everyone has the right to vote for a Conservative they want to. Clearly, we think Conservative councillors offer the best representation for the residents. So I mean, yeah. So it's. I think it's a bit of a sort of challenging one to a certain extent. I mean, we do a very good job of holding ourselves to account. We have a very robust scrutiny process, which does take place in open and public. We do as much as possible. We are out in there answering questions to the residents. We have public participation at council meetings where residents can ask questions. We have petition policies. So we do everything we possibly can to make sure residents' voices are heard. But ultimately, I think it all comes down to the fact that every single councillor on the council represents people in a non-partisan way. It's not about the fact you vote Conservative or Labour or Lib Dem. I'm always willing to talk to any of my residents about no matter what issue at all, whether they voted, they didn't vote, or if they voted for me or didn't vote for me. And then, on the council itself, and I think with Joe and others, we work in a quite collaborative way. I don't. It ever bothers me that you've got other parties on the council, and it's been less in my time. I've worked with UKIP councillors, I've worked with Labour councillors. I've got a very good relationship with Councillor Francis, as Phil mentioned. Work close on a number of issues, and it's great. We don't worry about party politics in some ways. We just get on and do the job that's best for our area.
So I guess my only challenge to that, Alex, is if I was a resident of Warren Park and less than 2 in 10 people feel it's worth putting an X in the box, is there a risk that because of the considerable majority that you've got, that maybe the effort into trying to engage with those residents, there's almost an element of well, you're going to win come what may?
I don't think it's kind of interesting. You picked up on Warren Park, particularly. Warren Park changed hands in the last election. It went from being Labour to Conservative, and actually, those people in those wards, we try our hardest to speak to them, to get to them, and get them to vote. I think it's like anywhere across the country, isn't it? What is the magic ingredient to get people to ballot box? And I'm someone that deeply is passionate in representative democracy and in politics and getting involved and having your voice. But I think it's a more wider problem than just in Warren Park. And I think if you were to go into Warren Park and speak to people who didn't vote, I don't think it's about the fact that there's 33 Conservative councils on the council as the reason why I don't vote. It's the same issues you'll find elsewhere in the country to do with apathy of politics in general, and you'll find the same in probably some of the wards in Portsmouth. And I'm not an expert in Portsmouth, but I think you would find similar issues in there and also in other parts of the country. So it's more of a challenge of actually how do you get people, convince them that voting is a good thing in general. I don't think they're worried about number of Conservatives in the council. It's about making sure they're understanding why democracy is important.
Perfect. Thank you, Alex.
I thought for 1 minute Ian was going to be advocating proportional representation then.
Yeah. Look, still breath in my body. Never going to happen. Go on to the next question.
So moving on to the next question, and I'll come to Joe with this one. So with the looking at the demographic spread, excuse me, while the cat just goes across the screen and backwards again. You've got areas as diverse as you've got Emsworth, Waterlooville, Purbrick, but you've got Hayling Island, but then you've also got obviously as we mentioned Warren Park and Lee Park. How different are different are they, and what are they kind of like different challenges? And is something that's quite often talked about quite openly is about Hayling being a very individual place, and it needs to be thought of differently. It's how does that all work, Joe?
Well, each section of the Havant Borough obviously has their own unique issues. Obviously, with Hayling Island, you've got the single bridge on and off, and obviously that's a lot of challenges for the traffic flow. They have the coastal side down there as well, but the majority of the issues in the whole of the borough are all the same. Like, every single borough has problems with antisocial behaviour, drugs, and it's we all have our own little issues to deal with, but a lot of them are the same. By working together, we may be able to help in other different ways that certain borough can't.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. I think there are challenges in different areas, and I think it's when we look at the borough in a whole, there's a different needs and different different makeup of different areas. I mean, look at Hayling Island is a great example. It's it's one of the largest islands in the country with a single road on and off it. As Joe mentioned, it's also got erosion on the seafront. So Havant Borough Council is in charge of coastal defence as another of our responsibilities. So we're going to protect the seafront and making sure homes aren't flooded. So we've got that responsibility. And Havant Town Centre, we've got regeneration, and the same in Waterlooville. Regeneration, it's trying to get economy and jobs moving, making sure breathe some lives into those areas. And again, Lee Park is different. Again, clearly, I represent one of the wards in Lee Park in Westley, and it's a lot more problems with social problems in terms of people needing help with housing, support in other ways. So yeah, it's a real mixture, and I think one of the things that makes Havant and its challenges are the fact it has different areas with different needs. So that makes our lives as a council, it's more challenging because we have to do lots of different things, but we're hopefully trying to rise to that challenge. Lots of different ideas, whether that be regeneration in the town centre is said, or whether or not that's looking towards boosting tourism or coastal defence on Hayling Island, or again in Waterlooville with trying to change that town centre again. So yes, there are the challenges, and that's what we're trying to address the council and trying to pull those things together.
Okay, thank you, Phil.
I think Havant's a really interesting place, partly because of the range of different communities, if you like, within it. I just want to say some things about some of the areas in Lee Park which really suffer quite a lot from if you like, a lack of enough money to do the things they'd want to do. So there's an awful lot of there are at least 2 food banks running in Lee Park. I think one of the issues is housing, which the council has the option to do something about. You see, one system that exists in several councils is that the council work with a local housing association and can build council houses which help those people, particularly young families, unable to find houses at affordable rents. And that's really a key issue in supporting young people who are at the poor end of the salary scale to be able to help to let them grow their families, develop their families in a good way. Now, the council can do something about that, and I think it's really important that they look into that as a possibility. I also think there's some things like when we're talking about developing and building houses, we ought to look more at existing town centres where the development could improve the environment for all of us. So, for example, in St Faith's, where I stand, our town centre has got some parts of it which definitely need improvement. They could also, at the same time, provide some of the housing required for our housing targets. And I really think it's important that we do that. But my area particularly, which is St Faith's, I think there are issues like the environment, cycleways, trees, which I think are important to lots of residents. And I think simply the option to have some say in what's going on.
Okay, thank you very much. And interestingly, kind of segueing about developments, Ian.
Yes, this one's quite a personal question to me. I spent 23 years, again, I started when I was 9, ploughing my furrow along New Lane. I spent 5 years with Gem Plus and then 18 years with Wyeth, that was then became Pfizer. And again, if I look at New Lane as an example of businesses like Goodman's and Colts and Eaton, and Pfizer has now been levelled, and Kenwood is a shadow of its former self. I guess my question is that, are those well-paid manufacturing jobs that used to be at the heart of the Havant economy, has that ship now sailed, or is there is Havant destined to be housing estates and distribution centres? I think I'd ask that first to Phil.
I think I have to admit I'm not an expert. I'm not an economics graduate, so I'm not an expert. But I think it's quite likely that we're going to need less manufacturing in the future, or certainly smaller units, and that might give us an opportunity to reconfigure the places that we're using for industry. I think the development of the Dunsbury Farm estate, the Brockhampton Lane, along with the whole area around the amenity tip, I think those are good places because they're actually not central Havant, and I think it's not a good idea to be developing New Lane for something like a transport hub for Amazon or whoever is likely to use it, because I think that's unhelpful, and I think there are better places for it. So I think we have to think carefully about the spaces we've got and how we use them, and possibly consider changing some of the industrial areas to be housing, and at the same time developing more industrial areas at the periphery of the town where they got immediate access to the transport system. I think Havant is a great place to live in, partly because it's such a good transport place. The trains, the boats, the roads are all very good to get you to lots of different places quite quickly. I think we need to make use of that, and that's why I think we've got to look at the areas we've got and use them more wisely.
Thank you, Phil. So same question to Joe.
I think that with the regeneration process we've been going through at Havant Borough, I think that working all together is going to bring some of those businesses back. We need that. We need the job opportunities for everybody, and companies that will offer that to children who leave school, because not everyone who leaves school goes straight into college. And even if it's starting at the bottom and working up, and by bringing those businesses in, whether it would be factory or transport, it gives the opportunity for everybody, and that's important. And for us to all work together, I think it's something that could be possible down the future. And obviously it's going to take time, but if we put all that work together as a council and as the community, the borough as a whole, we can make it better for everybody.
So you think there's still hope, Joe, that those kind of well-paid jobs will return to the borough? Because obviously I think Phil touched there on, and again, close to my heart, the old Pfizer site is now a car park, and there's talk that it's going to be a distribution centre for a well-known online retailer. But that kind of work brings £10, £12 an hour work rather than really well-paid salaries. You think there's still hope that that well-paying businesses will return to the borough?
Yes, yeah, I do, because I think they're going to see us growing as a borough through the regeneration and everything else we're ploughing into it. It's going to take time, I admit, but all working together, I believe that, yeah, it will happen.
Brilliant. Thank you, Joe. So, Alex, opportunity now as leader of the council to answer the question.
Thanks, Ian. And what I would say to you is, I live around the corner from New Lane. Come drive down there now. It is genuinely really thriving. So you've got the £10 million new Sartorius building that's been built. That's pharmaceutical, manufacturing business, helping deliver the vaccine program for the NHS. We've got the Butterick site that's just been finished, being built on New Lane. We've got, about Phil's previous point, we've got about 90 social houses going at the top of New Lane, the old Colt site, and that's been fronted by more economic business development that is yet to be decided, but that's earmarked. It genuinely is proving to be a really, really popular place for businesses to invest. You've got the absolute magic ingredients in my mind. You've got the A27 corridor, the A3 corridor to London, you've got an hour and 20 to London on the train, and you've got the ports of Portsmouth and Southampton right on our doorstep. We are absolutely a fantastic place to invest, and you're seeing it all the time, day in, day out. We are seeing companies choose Havant to headquarter, to invest in. Fatface have just chosen it, recently built their new headquarters distribution centre up at Dundry Park. We're chosen in Dundry Park as a tax site for the new Solent Freeport, which means the whole of the borough is now incorporated inside of the Freeport area. That's going to see massive benefits. We're really pushing for a skills centre to go into Lee Park alongside that. I genuinely could not be more positive about Havant getting investment as a place to do business, and you're seeing it all the time. Genuinely, have a drive around Havant, have a look at some of the investments taking place, economic development that's taking place. Businesses are choosing Havant as a place to invest and are doing it absolutely all day, every day.
Is there not a risk that Havant becomes a dormitory town? You mentioned the rail line to London, and in the time that I lived briefly in Havant, and as I say, worked there for 23 years. There was an awful lot of housing being built, but not an enormous amount of factories.
I don't know what you mean by that sort of concept, Ian, but I think people are yes, it's a residential area, it's a market town, it has that nature to it, but people are investing money in Havant, and I say I've listed the examples. People are doing it. It's been seen as a real economic hub because it's outside of Portsmouth, it's outside the city, it's on those lines. It's got a lot of people living locally with a lot of skills, and people are choosing to invest and develop in it. And I think you've only got to look and drive around the borough, and I get to do it all the time, every day, and I'm seeing, and even in the last 4 or 5 years, when you go around Havant, you see the amount of investment that is taking place. Genuinely, it is becoming a real hotbed of investment.
Excellent news.
Okay, so maybe if things are that good for Havant PLC, then maybe the next question is a bit superfluous then. So I'll take this first to Alex. So like any major council, Havant Borough Council's got some quite deprived areas, in contrast to obviously other areas that are much better off. If you were asking the government for help in levelling up, that phrase that we're hearing a lot at the moment, is there anything specific you would ask for, and what would it be?
Yeah, I think I think whilst I give a really strong reply about what's great about Havant, I think it's got all those wonderful, great attributes. Clearly with a lot of challenges to address. I'm not saying everything is completely rosy. We've got this great investment opportunity. I mentioned with the Freeport, we've got a real opportunity to invest. But like any market town on the outskirts of a city like Havant and Waterloo are. They are suffering from the rise of online sales, people wanting to not go out, go to the shops. So, what is our major challenge in terms of levelling up? It really is our town centres that require a lot of work, a lot of investment, getting them to a standard that is one we can be proud about. So I think when we're talking about levelling up arse and levelling up wants, it really is to do with our two major town centres. It's to do with Havant, it's to do with Waterlooville. And that's exactly where we're going to the government and saying, making the case really that we need some investment to unlock some of our regeneration plans, and we've got plans and ideas and hopes of what they might be. But actually, that's what we need. So specifically from the government, what do we require to unlock our levelling up? It is our town centres, and we're making that case. We're putting the bids in. We're quite strong about doing that. But and obviously we're hopeful we'll get some successes over the next year or so.
Okay, thank you very much, Joe. Rishi Sunak's on the phone with a blank check. What would you like to spend it on?
Tough question. No, I agree with Alex. Yeah, we need to focus on the Havant and the Waterloo town centres. But I represent Battins and Lee Park, and over the pandemic, the lockdowns, the whole Lee Park community has come together to help each other. So, I mean, one of the food banks that Phil mentioned is, based here in Lee Park shopping centre. We need some more help to go towards that, get it out there. More youth activities would be fantastic, I think, in the borough as a whole. I don't know of any youth club near here at all now. So that would hopefully counteract the antisocial behaviour. Park Community School have been fantastic. They do a munch thing where they do free school, free on Christmas Day. If you want to come to the school, you can go to the school, pay for a Christmas meal and have the Christmas meal there. So you don't have to worry about paying out to get that food in for you. And maybe some help and support and training courses maybe for first-time parents. I'm a mum. I've got 2 kids. When I first had my first kid, you have all these questions going through your head. Am I doing it right? And I think having those courses that could be made available to everybody, whether they're a single parent or a couple, I think that would help in a long way.
Okay. Interesting, diverse range of answers there. So thank you, Joe. That's good. And Phil, what would you want to see?
That's an attractive option. I think first 6 things I've put down. Firstly, build houses that are at affordable social rents so that all young families can live in their own home and bring up their families. I think that's number 1. And I think this council can do some of that, but I think more money from the government would definitely help that. The second thing is transport. I think there are many parts of the borough where the transport within it is not very good. So I said earlier that I actually think the transport network that Havant's in the middle of, the national network, is actually very good. But I think within Havant, the bus system isn't as good as it could be. I know that's a problem of funding, and I think with a bit more funding, it would help a lot. And if we want more people to get into work, we have to provide them with fairly cheap transport so they can move from where they live to where they work. And that's a key part of whether we're going to get more people into work and help more people out of poverty. Third thing, I think we need more police to be seen. I did some work when I actually stood in Battins against Joe, actually, 4 years ago. And I did a survey. I went round the Park Shopping Centre on a couple of Saturdays and asked people what the big issues were. And some of them were housing, but one of the big ones was actually the lack of police presence. So, and I actually was there while somebody walked out of a shop having stolen stuff from the shop, and the security guard came up and asked them to stop, but they didn't. They just walked off. And when I spoke to people, they all said, well, actually, the issue is that there's not a police officer within sight. And if we call for them, by the time they've got there, the person who's gone has gone and disappeared. Now, I think those sort of things really bring people down because they feel that they're not they're not able to do the things that they want to do. So I think it's really important that there are adequate police on the ground in any of these places where antisocial behaviour can occur. The third thing I think is actually Lee Park Shopping Centre, as Joe said, itself really needs redevelopment, and it should be a priority for us because it's probably the most rundown of the shopping centres, and yet it's got a lot of vibrant people within the community. So I think that should be a priority. The fifth thing I think is funding to help. I think I agree with Alex that actually the government should be helping us to develop both those town centres, because I think they need to provide the money. If you're going to convert brownfield sites which have got decaying, poor housing and build them up again, you need to do that. And I think the government should help us with that. And the last thing to me is possibly linked to my job. I think there are real issues about mental health in our young people. And I think some mental health support provided locally would be really important. That's my list.
Okay, thank you very much. So again, a very wide-ranging and thought-out list. So thank you very much.
So, yeah, last question for me, which is a little bit of a niche, which is that Portsmouth City Council actually owns some fairly large tracts of land within Havant Borough. Last year, the Portsmouth Conservatives, their manifesto pledge was that if they were brought into office, they would sell a large tract of land in Havant that's earmarked for social housing to effectively allow Portsmouth residents to have a zero-rated, a zero-rise council tax. So I guess my question is, how do you feel about Portsmouth maybe owning and looking to direct the way land is used within Havant Borough? So if I can address that first to Joe.
Well, Portsmouth City Council, they're no different to other landowners, really. They're always, there's these land, they got this land that they want to use for housing, but, I think the diversity of people that will bring in, and it's a lot of social housing as well. I'm on the planning committee, so when planning comes forward for big housing estates, we ask for 30% of that to be social housing. And I think working together that way with Portsmouth City Council, it's getting that needed housing there for everybody. Yeah, I can't think of anything else to say there, sorry.
No worries. No, it's not a problem. We're running out of time anyway, Joe. So Alex, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we're in a very unusual situation, really, in that our neighbouring local authority owns huge swathes of land in our borough, and I think that you'll be very hard pressed to find another local authority in the council that has a similar situation, and so almost unique. I guess from my point of view, I as leader do not or try not to get involved in Portsmouth party politics. Whilst I wish my Conservative colleagues well in Portsmouth, I don't really get involved with their policies, ideas. I have a very good working relationship with Gerald and Darren, the Lib Dem team over at Portsmouth. We get on well. We have regular meetings. That I'm on a one level, I'm pleased they're doing things like Cabbage Row, which we've managed to secure 30% of the social housing naming rights, if you like, but I mean, on the whole, because their Portsmouth land is and Portsmouth housing is for Portsmouth people, they're kind of whether they build more social housing or housing in general, or if they do commercial residential, in some ways it doesn't necessarily matter huge amounts to me, because even if they do build housing, then it'll be Portsmouth residents coming here and using it. So it's an interesting one. You look, and I'm very happy for Portsmouth councillors and Portsmouth politicians to go on and do what they think is best for Portsmouth, and I'll just do my best to work with them and help them any way I can.
Perfect. Thank you, Alex. Phil, your thoughts?
Well, I understand. I mean, I've certainly heard people say that Portsmouth have been quite a good landlord for the people who they, the properties that they own. So I'm not necessarily being very anti-Portsmouth in this. I think they've probably done quite a good job, and it's historical, as you know, following the war. So I think that's understandable. If Portsmouth sell it, I presume they would sell land that's already built on, because there isn't very much land that's not built on that Portsmouth owned. I don't know of it anyway, if it is. So it's simply a question in large measure about what the housing, who owns the housing that currently is provided for a lot of our tenants. And I think a good link with Portsmouth is a healthy thing anyway. So I'm not put out by the idea that Portsmouth might move things around a little bit. I'm sure that we should be able to manage around that.
Perfect. Thank you, Phil. Simon.
Okay, so our last question, and I will go first to Phil. What is your vision for Havant over the next 5 years?
My first point is really, I think I want more public involvement. I think want better communication. I want the situation where if you fill in a request form to the council, you actually get an answer, because I personally have put 3 requests in before I get any answer over a period of 6 months. And I know many residents find that really difficult. So I think we really need to get that better. But I also think we need to consult more widely. Interestingly, when the government inspectors rejected Havant local plan, or they sent it back to be improved, one of their criticisms was that the council had not adequately consulted with the residents about the plan. And I think that's an example where more consultation actually would probably lead to less disquiet if people understood the motives behind some of the proposals. And some of them might change because the residents have a good point that is brought up that the councillors might not realise. So I think that's really important. I think we need to do more to improve our town centres. I really think there's an awful lot that's great about Havant. I personally, like Alex, actually believe it's a really good place to live in. But I just think our town centres don't do us any favours. And it's not impossible to change those. And they've been talking about it for the last 20 years or 30 years, actually. So why don't they get on with it? Because I think there are things that you could do even without extra money from the government that we ought to do. And the third bit is I think we need to show a bit more leadership on environmental issues. Why, for example, do we not have curbside collection of glass, curbside collection of vegetable waste, which lots of councils do have? Why do we not have expectations that all new houses have got solar panels built onto them? That's crazy, because, and there are boroughs, there are councils that expect that. Why doesn't ours? I think if you look at our environmental record, apart from passing a broad motion about this some 2 or 3 years ago, we really haven't done very much. And I feel strongly that my vision would involve a lot more active improvements to the environment.
Okay, thank you. So, Alex, your vision for Havant for the next 5 years?
Okay, Simon, thanks, Simon. I think I will be careful because I'll probably talk forever and ever if I'm not careful. I'm probably aware we're wrapping up soon. So as a cabinet, we're actually shortly to bring forward our refreshed corporate strategy, which will be sort of like setting out our vision for Havant for the next 3 years. So I would actually encourage, once it's published in this month, residents actually read that and take into account some of the stuff we're talking about. But it rolls around 6 sort of key themes as I see it and we see it. And one is environmentally aware and cleaner borough. So we've got a new climate change and environment strategy that we recently passed the full council. It's bringing that through. It's delivering on some of those priorities. It's also taking through the changes of the Environment Act that Phil touched upon, some of the things about how we change our recycling to make our recycling rates better. And that's something I'm really passionate about, is improving our recycling rates in Havant. And the Environment Act gives us a really good opportunity to make some of those changes. Secondly is a safe environment, healthier and more active residents. One thing that I'm really passionate about is improving some of our play parks, getting in a better shape and getting some of our kids more active at a younger age, tackling childhood obesity, which I think is really, really important. So we've got some policies around that. A thriving local economy. We touched upon that earlier in the show, and that's about supporting some of our local businesses. But it's also about making a success of the Solar Freeport, which I think is a really massive opportunity for Havant. How do we take that forward? How do we make sure that whilst we're getting the government support via the Freeport, how do we get our skills leveled up themselves? So how do we make sure that everyone in our borough have the skills to be able to work in the jobs that are created by the Freeport? Fourthly, it's a revitalised borough with infrastructure that meets our ambitions, and that touches upon things like making sure we close the funding on the Warburton footbridge, for instance. It's about making sure some of our regeneration plans are delivered, making sure our town centres are ready for the challenges of the next 10 to 20 years. So next one is responsive and commercial council. So we're really going out and trying to make sure that we deliver a successful transformation program. We're ending our shared partnership East Hampshire. So that better council, working better, delivering, putting them first. And then finally, it's a quality home for all, which again we touched on a little bit upon earlier. It's about making sure we've got enough quality home for all of our residents, whether that's social housing, whether that's housing for rent or housing to buy. And as a council, we're going to explore some really interesting and innovative ideas. I'm really passionate about having a housing company for Havant, and actually making sure we have that housing supply and housing need, and also making sure that we cut the number of people in B&Bs, and we already have a very, very low rate of homelessness, but making sure that that continues. We don't have rough sleepers, and people are provided a home. So that's my broad vision. But as I said, that we go into a lot more detail, a lot more ideas, and end of the month we'll be publishing our new updated and refreshed corporate strategy. So please do read. I know it's a wordy document, but we tried to make it a bit more visual this year. So hopefully it's something that people can engage with.
Okay, lovely. And last but not least, Joe.
Okay, I'll try and make it quick. So, sorry. I think more social housing, greener, easier routes for children to be able to walk to school. Better provision of healthcare would be great. My doctor's surgery used to be New Park Shopping Centre. It's now moved up to Park Lane, so it's a bit of a walk for me now to get to the doctors. So maybe something a bit closer. Help with people who want to start allotments, the training they need, grow your own vegetables. Playground facilities nearby for all children. They shouldn't have to walk a long way to be able to go to their local playground. That's pretty much it. Less reliability on using your car. Get the public transport system a bit better. Yes. I don't drive. I'm happy to get on a bus and go where I need to go, or go for a walk if it's nice weather, sun shining, and better promotion of our local attractions. I'm nearby Staunton Country Park, so I love walking around the lake. So local promotion of the sort of areas you can go out and get your exercise.
Brilliant.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
So thank you all. It's been a fantastic episode, and a really insightful view into Havant and the challenges and opportunities that you guys have got. So thank you to all. You've been listening to the Pompey /Havant Politics podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And our guests have been
Alex. Ready? Leader of the council. Sorry, I missed the intro where I said what has happened this bit. So you should have gone to me first.
That's fine. Sorry, Alex and Joe.
Yeah, it's Joe. Hi.
And Phil Monday, I'm standing in St Faith's this coming election.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. And I've been Simon Sansbury. You've been listening to the Pompey Politics podcast. Please don't forget to follow us, like us, share us on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Join us next week for another show, 6:27, live on social media.